Our first speaker, and we're running a little bit early, which is cool because it's always nice to have a little bit of time to go a little bit early because things tend to slow down over the course of a conference if you've ever been to one before. Our first speaker is going to be Manuel Pais. So, Manuel is the co author of a book which, if you haven't read it, you really should. Okay, it's called Team Topologies, Organizing Business and Technology Teams for Fast Flow. If you are a manager, or if you have ever managed, or if you're a team lead, or if you're an IC, if you're someone that is managed and you're looking to understand how teams can be managed, if you're looking to understand how work can be broken down, how teams can communicate with each other, this is just a really, really, really good, not only primer, but also practical book on the subject. So Manuel's been recognized by Tech Beacon as a DevOps thought leader. He's a consultant. He's a trainer. He focuses on delivery practices, accelerating flow. He's a LinkedIn instructor. The guy kind of does it all. And he's got a lot of really good stuff to say. And you're going to have a lot of questions because a lot of this conversation starters. And we really want you to interact, to ask the speaker everything in the slide. You can find the link in the YouTube chat. And the topic that Manuel is going to be sharing with us is called Beyond Engineering, so the future of platforms. So in many organizations, despite myriad advancements in breaking down engineering silos, that's the whole idea of DevOps, right? It's breaking down those silos. We've done a pretty good job at that over the past 10 years. There remains nonetheless a pretty significant gap in understanding between teams and different divisions, different business units, and so on and so forth, right? Now, this disconnection can impede the delivery of value to customers, which is the whole point of business, right? And it's often due to internal processes, the prioritize speed over outcomes, or really one thing over another, right? Not outcomes, spoiler alert. So Manuel is going to sort of explore the concept of treating internal offerings as products. And I don't want to give the whole thing away. So nonetheless, it's going to be super, super interesting. We're going to talk about data science, leadership, marketing, legal, HR, everything wrapped up into one powerful talk. And again, if you have questions, that's what the slide is for. Manuel, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Why don't you take it away, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I think that was probably the most amazing introduction I've ever had. So thank you for that and for all your effort on these conferences, and also everyone who helped organize DevOps Days Ukraine. You've done a fantastic job once again, and that's really impressive. So as you mentioned, Daniel, I'm going to be talking about Beyond Engineering, the future of platforms. I don't have a crystal ball, so whatever you hear today, don't expect that's going to turn out exactly like that. But I do have some interesting ideas, I think, on how we can apply some of the principles we've started using in platform engineering, in DevOps, outside of engineering, right? So that's the topic. Daniel already mentioned, I'm one of the authors of the book Team Topologies. And the book obviously was focused on not only DevOps, but kind of technology and business teams. And what I want to talk about today is how does this translate outside of engineering, right? Does it make sense even to think about some of the same principles and patterns outside of engineering, where we might not be talking about actual software, services, or products? We might be talking about other ways to basically implement the same principles and patterns. The reason why I'm passionate about this is because I start to see more and more as we make progress with DevOps, with in engineering, is that the ways of working have evolved quite a lot inside engineering. But when you look outside, especially the larger the organization you work in, then the more it becomes visible that ways of working outside engineering really can impact the flow of value as well, and value even through digital products and services. And sometimes this is indirectly, other times directly. But think about, I'm pretty sure many of you have had issues or situations, I would say, where maybe you asked for some training and the effort you had to put in to get the training approved was higher than the actual effort to take the training, right? Maybe some aspects of a procurement process didn't allow you to use the right tool for the job that you need to do. So you had to find a lesser alternative, right? Mostly because of, or oftentimes because of process issues and the way where parts of the organization are set up. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The key thing I'm trying to say here is that there's this sort of divide in ways of working, from my experience at least, um, between engineering and sort of the rest of the organization, or a large part of the rest of the organization. And it's not to say that engineering is great and fantastic. There are also a lot of problems still, but we've made a lot of progress with DevOps, right? So on the left side, it used to be a lot more fragmented, right? You had the usual dev on one side, ops on the other side, security on yet another side, and sometimes that's still the case. Um, but we've made a lot of progress. Now there's this sort of divide between these two sides. Um, and what I see, or sort of on the right side of this picture, um, and it's natural in a way, is that those teams in whatever department, legal, accounting, HR, etc., they have not been exposed to the same principles that we talk about in engineering for a number of years, sometimes decades for some of these things. When we talk about principles for fast flow, having the right interfaces, how do we think about the usability of what we're providing to other teams? How do we become enablers and we unblock others instead of blocking them, right? In the way we provide whatever service we provide internally to other teams. Um, and how do we evolve what we offer according to what our internal customers need? All these things obviously are mentioned in team topologies. Many of them have been around for a while before team topologies. But when you look at the rest of the organization, typically they have not been exposed or introduced to this sort of ideas, right? And what tends to happen is that those teams, in general, tend to optimize for their internal processes, which might be lower value. I'm not saying that they're not valuable, but sticking to the processes might be lower value than focusing on what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve as an organization, as a business, right? And again, this is natural. It's not to say that there's any kind of bad intention, but if you think about it, if there are no other incentives, if you have, let's say, a team that works on funding and budgeting, of course they want to have the budget set out for the next year or for the next 6 months and not have to worry about it until 1 year from now. Of course, that's how they would optimize their internal process. Or procurement might have a standard process to deal with any kind of suppliers and vendors, and they optimize to stick to the same process, even if it doesn't really work very well for certain situations. In other words, these teams and these departments are often focused on optimizing for how many cycles they can run and how fast they can run those cycles, right? They're not optimizing to deal with variation in what other teams in the organization need. And that's due because I think most of the time what I see is a lack of alignment of incentives, or even having awareness of what are the incentives for fast flow in particular and for fast delivery of value to customers. So this conversation might sound familiar to many of you, right? We've been here with DevOps, or if you've been around in the industry for more than 5-10 years, like I have almost for over 20 years now. A lot of these issues of optimizing for the internal processes and not thinking about how does this impact other teams in the organization used to happen as well in engineering. And that's why I think to some extent, or to a large extent, DevOps came around. So we have here the mandatory quote from Patrick Debois. Yeah, just kidding. But he recently said that he came with his own definition of DevOps, and you can ask him later on if this is true or not, but he confirmed it's true. Um, where he nailed it down to everything you do to overcome the friction between silos is DevOps. All the rest is plain engineering. So I quite like this differentiation because you can focus on, okay, if DevOps is about overcoming friction between silos, then it's really not just about engineering. It's really not just about dev and ops, right? Um, I also want to, just before I move forward, talking about platforms and why the ideas from platform engineering, platform as a product can help us outside of engineering. Let's just make sure we're on the same page because we never know what are different definitions that people have of platform. When I'm talking about a platform here is I'm using this definition from Evan Butcher on a digital platform being a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support arranged as a compelling internal product. So embedded in this definition is the idea of treating the platform as a product, right? And platform as a product has been shown to be a key pattern for that definition of from Patrick of for overcoming friction between silos. A large part of that, obviously, if done right, if we really adopt this idea of the platform as a product that is consumed by others in the organization, is sort of an internal product, then necessarily it's because we are treating others as our customers, right? So if you treat others as your customers, what's happening is that you tend and you will be taking a more empathic approach to what you're building or trying to offer, right? You will think about the other people who are, of course, also your peers, and that might pose some specific questions. And I'll be happy to answer if you have any questions about that. But we can apply the same idea. These people that will consume some internal platform, some services, are our customers. So, what problems are they trying to solve? What do they need to make their life easier? What kind of experience would help them do and achieve what they need in a faster way, right? So those are some of the basic ideas of treating the platform as a product. Now, I'd like to very briefly share with you how I see engineering platforms or whatever the term you like to use, internal platforms, any kind of platforms that we tend to see in engineering organizations. What have we gotten right so far, in my experience? So your mileage may vary a lot. Some of these things I'm going to mention might seem very optimistic. Others might seem this is trivial for us in an organization. Obviously, every organization is different. But sort of what I see with talking with customers and talking with um, all kinds of people working in our industry is some patterns seem to have taken on more adoption than others. So one of those is the focus on the user experience when we're building and growing a platform. So there's a lot of focus on the developer experience, DevX, right? Um, and that's great. That means we're thinking about, okay, what is really the right tool for the job that our engineering teams need to do, right? We're thinking about usability. We're thinking about how to make it easier and faster for teams to consume the platform. Another thing that I see quite a lot, obviously, this has been influenced by team topologies since we introduced this idea of team cognitive load. Um, and a lot of people are looking at platforms as a way to manage cognitive load at scale. If in fact a couple of years ago there was one of the state of DevOps reports, right? Because now we have two every year, one from Puppet Labs, one from Google and Dora. But a couple of years ago, they were looking at how the organizational structures and the team structures impacted the maturity around DevOps for hundreds or thousands of organizations. And what they found is that highly evolved companies use a combination of stream-aligned or product teams, if you like to think in that way, and platform teams as the most effective way to manage cognitive load at scale. And well, this is basically the topic of a whole other talk, but basically think about it in terms of removing from the product teams or streamline teams, as we call them, a lot of the distractions they have around tooling, frameworks, but also processes and lack of automation or poor automation, and trying to kind of bring that down to a platform that does those things really well with the right involvement and effort and thinking about usability and all these things, right? So that cognitive load for the product teams or streamline teams is reduced and they can focus more of their capacity on the actual problems that they're trying to solve for the customers. And finally, another thing I think we've made progress is platform teams with extensive product experience. Now, you might be wondering, I'm not sure about this one. Well, I'm not sure either, but I had to make a balance between what we've got right so far and the things that we are behind. But joking aside, I do think we have improved. There's platform teams start to have some relevant product experience, or at least some product experience. At least the seed of thinking doing product development and growth right is quite difficult and requires a lot of decisions and prioritization and understanding users and balancing different needs and requests from different parts of the organization. So it's actually quite challenging. So we really need a lot more, I would say, product experience in platform teams, in platform groupings of teams. But we have a start. I think at least there's awareness that this is needed. Almost, I would say, most customers I talk to, they might haven't gotten there yet, but they understand this is needed, something they have to work on, bringing more product expertise into the platforms. And what are we missing from engineering platforms? Again, this is my biased perspective. You might find some of this that you agree or you don't agree. Some of the things that we need to have more awareness and think a bit more about is that the boundaries of platforms should be more fluid. What is in and out of an engineering platform should be expected to change over time, not just simply that the platform starts somewhere and keeps growing forever, right? There's a real danger that we have too much inside the platform, especially when we're talking about kind of core functionality platforms. And that kind of early platformization, if you like, of too many aspects of the core business functionality might actually introduce a lot of blocking dependencies and teams being locked down to the platform and not able to evolve certain aspects of the business because the platform is the only owner of that, right? So what I'm saying is that if we have very rigid platform boundaries, we might be actually blocking teams and increasing cognitive load because they have no way to do things to improve what is in the platform, and then they have to find workarounds and all kind of things, right? Again, I could go on for a lot longer about this topic, but that would be a whole other talk. Another thing that maybe we start to have a bit of awareness, but it's kind of obvious if you think about it, but we don't always kind of realize it or keep it top of mind, is how much cognitive load we might be instilling in the platform teams, right? If we're not careful, these platform teams might have a lot of different tools, frameworks, technology they need to know about. They might have to be providing very different services to very different teams with very different needs. And they might have too many responsibilities in the same team in terms of we need to develop the platform services, we need to operate them with a high level of availability, operability, etc. We need to enable and help the users of the platform, right? Sometimes we have to help them even understand kind of the domain that we're talking about, that we're working on. Whether that's monitoring, observability, all those kind of things that maybe the consumers of platform need help to understand, why should I use this service? And we need to communicate and also do a little bit of marketing of the platform itself to the rest of the organization, or at least to the other teams in engineering. Right, so this is a lot of different responsibilities and things to talk about. So we need to be careful. So the first point is to be aware that the platform teams can get quickly overloaded as well. And so we need to be realistic about the capacity of platform teams. If we don't have um, enough capacity and cognitive capacity, we need to reduce how many things we're offering to others, right? And let them, the other teams, let's say the product teams, have the ability to decide and use maybe third party vendors more easily for things that we don't have capacity inside the platform. And the other aspect is to, inside the platform, start to organize around streams of value as well, right? Let's move away a bit from um, technology or move away from teams trying to do a lot to actually focus on what is the service that we provide that is of value to the customers. Um, and organize ourselves around that as well, because the platform teams, again, need to have a clear focus. They need to have capacity to understand well the service they provide and not be kind of spread thin over too many services or tools that they provide to others. Then it will be very hard to provide a good experience to our customers. And finally, another aspect, and I'm going to try to be brief here because I want to get to the platforms outside of engineering part. But I think it's important just to be mindful as well that we, I think, need to have more understanding of impact of trust boundaries in the effectiveness of platforms. So what do I mean with this is that any organization that has, 40, 50 people and then growing up to thousands of employees or people working in engineering to start with, um, this is going to have an impact on how effective the platform can be, right? Um, the platform organizational structure or design and the communications need to be optimized for high trust. If people don't trust the platform teams, not even the services, it's at a deeper level. If people in the organization don't trust to some extent the platform teams, either because they don't know them, they have never had contact, or because of some misunderstanding on what was being said or provided, um, then the platform can have the best service in the world and it's not going to be effective because people don't trust it because of they don't see they're not connected to the actual platform teams, right? So there are problems of trust also inside the platform grouping as well. So if I've seen many cases where there is one platform and then you look at it and there's maybe 200 people working on this platform and all sorts of services being provided, it's very difficult to keep a reasonable level of trust across these 200 people or more, right? So there are questions of trust inside the platform and then obviously between the teams outside the platform. Like I said, the larger the organization, the more this becomes a problem. We might need to think about what are some good strategies in terms of what can be a centralized platform or service versus what should be decentralized, even if that might seem like we might be having some duplication if we're decentralizing some service that now needs to be provided by multiple local platform teams. But sometimes it's worth it because that will generate more trust. If we have local platform teams that can connect and can enable the teams around them much more effectively, that is probably worth a cost, probably worth paying, right? Um, anyway, just this idea that the size of platform and how many teams are consuming the platform has an impact on trust. And if you don't have high trust, the effectiveness of platform goes down. But coming back to treating others as your customers, and what does this mean outside of engineering, right? How do we bring these lessons that we've been learning and we keep learning in engineering to other parts of the organization that maybe have never been exposed to these kind of ideas? So we can use some examples, and that's the really exciting thing for me around how some of the ideas from team topologies and others are kind of can be expanded outside of engineering and the value that can bring. And so there's some examples. For example, compliance as a platform. Um, I'll explain why they're bananas in his slide. Think about a team or a group of teams that focus and work on compliance. What could be a platform here? Well, we might have some services. We might have a compliance platform where some services around might be around how do we search for regulations that apply to our product or our service as a engineering product team, right? How can we use this compliance platform to find the regulations that apply to our to what we're building? An easier way to figure out what we need to be mindful of, especially in highly regulated industries. But there are typically regulations um, in most industries that we need to follow. Maybe we have an auditing checklist that we can follow and figure out faster by ourselves what are the things that we might still need to check or change to make sure we're compliant, right? So this is an example where maybe these things, these services in this kind of compliance platform are not actual running software. This might be um, wikis, this might be documentation, but there should be or there needs to be a focus on how will the teams consume this service, even if it's documentation or wiki. How do we make it easier to search? How do we link to the right documentation so that they can get the right context, etc.? And there's some amount of enabling work that needs to happen as well. It's not just here's the platform, now use it. We need to have the right interactions in place. So what's interesting, the reason why you saw bananas is that there are some organizations that have come up with something sort of like this. I had a chat at the conference with someone who was explaining they were helping a customer that works with basically the labeling of food items like bananas. And there's actually quite a fair amount of regulations about how do you go about doing that? How do you certify the origin and all kind of things around the stuff that we buy at the supermarket that we see, what kind of labeling it has. And so they have this sort of approach where they have people in compliance, that are experts in compliance. They're trying to provide this kind of platform so that people on the field have an easier way to figure out what do I have to understand to be able to do my job and execute it more effectively. So that's quite a cool example, I think. Another one comes from legal. Let's say, most organizations have a legal department or a legal team. What would make sense as a sort of legal platform? Well, maybe if we have teams that need to establish contracts with suppliers or vendors, etc., or other companies providing any kind of service, maybe if we want fast flow, we want to be able to engage with those suppliers or contractors, etc., in a fast way. Maybe if we had a sort of legal platform where we have an easy way to access kind of standard NDA contracts, standard statement of work type of proposals, and many other things that we might fit in there, maybe that's going to help achieve us faster flow and have less dependencies between any of those teams A, B that you see there, whether they're engineering or somewhere else, and have less of a blocking dependency on the legal team or the legal department, because now we might be able to self-serve some of this stuff. Of course, we're not going to become experts in legal just because we have a platform we can use, and I don't recommend trying to become an expert in legal. But we can cover maybe a large amount of the standard, simple cases that we need to cover, that we need to have some of these contracts in place. Turns out, again, I've seen examples of this. Maybe it's early days, but I did have one contact at a customer where I could see from the exchange in the emails actually that their legal team has a kind of platform that a wiki, and they showed to my contact, here are the NDAs that you can use for this type of contract with us, in that case, as a provider. Um, so there are already some early examples. One of the issues I see, even in those early examples, is if we don't think that we need to evolve the team interactions, then this type of platforms might be blocked, and they need to evolve as well, right? So in this particular example of the legal platform, what happened was that the NDAs they had were not a good fit for the situation what we were discussing, and so I could see again from the answers from like my contact that there was no openness from their legal um, teams to actually understand there's a new use case here. We need to go back and collaborate. That would be what would have made sense in that case, to collaborate and see, okay, we need another type of NDA, or we need another type of statement of work template, right? That was the situation. And they just said, no, this is the only ones you can use. It's what's in the platform. So even inside engineering, this happens sometimes, but especially outside, there's kind of this idea, even when they're adopting this platform approach, that in a self-service way, there is lack of awareness that they need to evolve much faster. And finally, leadership as a platform. I know I'm getting to the end of the talk, but also around leadership, another example that I've seen where a consulting company in Norway actually tried to apply these ideas from team topologies to the whole organization. And their leadership became a sort of platform type of team where they provide strategy boards. They provide, here are some useful metrics. Here are business goals as a company. Here are some useful metrics that you might want to implement or look at in your own product or service that you provide to our customers. So I'll try to summarize briefly. Basically, we want to play well together, right, to make this stuff work. We need some shared principles, and we need teams or departments outside of engineering to understand why these principles are useful. So it's still mostly a people problem. It's not so much a technical problem. And very, very quickly, I quite like this quote from Byron Miller. He works at Red Hat. And he's saying it's not just about autonomy for teams to do what they need faster, and it's not just doing what they want. It's be able to operate effectively with safety and have encoded values that are jointly shared. So values encoded in those types of platforms. So I thought this was a really good insight that I wanted to share. So very quickly, what are the key shared values that we need to have in place for this kind of things to work? We need to prioritize fast flow of value to end customers. That needs to be kind of the shift in many parts of the organization. Is not about optimizing our internal processes, on optimizing the flow of value to end customers. Let's focus on unblocking other teams through curated self-service patterns, right? This should be a key aspect of providing a platform to others. The platform should be open to change, and we need to expect to collaborate with others to discover new needs, to find out how do we cover these new needs in the platform. We need to optimize for adoption and discoverability. So not optimize for how many cycles we can run, how many times this is used, but actually make it easy to adopt and discover. And finally, enable others by meeting them where they are today. This is, to me, very important value to any kind of platform, also in engineering. Like, you have customers, you cannot expect that all the customers are the same, or that what you provide is going to be helpful for all of them. We need to understand where the different teams are. Some teams might be very far ahead, other teams might be very behind in the domain that you're trying to help them with, right? So we need to meet them where they are today. So I hope with this talk, I'm getting to the end, that this just shines a light. There's, I think, a lot that might evolve in the next years over applying platform outside of engineering. And maybe next time you see a team that's optimizing for internal processes, maybe this is something that come up and you can talk to them and kind of talk about these ideas of self-service, fast flow, and blocking others, and see if that resonates with them, and hopefully start changing internally as well. We have, in terms of resources around team topologies, if you're interested, the main site's teamtopology.com, and we have an academy. I just want to mention we have a discount. Um, this code will give you 15% off. Also, by the end of September, we'll donate the amount that was discounted to UA responders as well, right? But please help if you can donate also during the conference. And thank you very much for listening to me. Sorry, I went over, I think, a few minutes.
Yes, indeed, you did go over a few minutes, but that's okay. It's my job to put us back on the rails. So, a round of virtual applause. Just pretend you've got hundreds of thousands of screaming fans in an enormous stadium.
Yeah, I can hear them.
Yes, exactly. So we do have a little bit of time for a couple questions. Thank you to everybody in the chat. The chat's going off, which is nice, and also some questions in the slide here. One of the cool things about being the MC of the event is that I get to ask my own question if I want to, and I am going to. And my question is, what is a concrete example of optimizing a platform for high trust?
Yeah, I think one of the anti-patterns I've seen frequently is the platform grows, and we need more people, we need more teams inside the platform, and we start to provide all kinds of services, which is good in itself, right? We're trying to help other teams do these things in an easier way through the platform, but we get to a point where we're very disjointed inside the platform. We have a large number of people, even inside the platform, they don't know each other that well. You start to have dependencies inside platform between platform teams, and so kind of the trust goes down. So there's something called Dunbar's number, which talks about 150 is sort of the average number of people we can have a kind of a reasonable social connection with, and this actually plays out in reality in organizations when you get to those sort of numbers. So the larger the organization, the more that happens. And the other that I see trust kind of going down is if you have a central platform that might be serving hundreds of teams across the world, then, like I said, it's very difficult for people that consumers of a platform to feel connected to them, to the platform teams, because maybe we never talk to them or we only hear from them through emails, etc. And so that human connection really plays a role, and people are not as willing to adopt the platform services that you provide if they don't feel that they trust the teams, or that they know the teams behind that. So it's basically Conway's law applied to platform teams as well. If you have everything centralized and you have a large number of consumers and teams consuming that, you're going to have trust issues.
Excellent. So for those of you playing the DevOps Days bingo game at home, you can pick Dunbar's number and Conway's Law off of your bingo card.
And the same
Congratulations.
Answer, yeah.
So another question, another good one. Developers often do platform engineering sort of as a side job. It is, of course, its own job, but a lot of developers are doing it as a side job. What are the key criteria to plan or to size, to correctly size, I guess, a dedicated platform team?
So one thing is adopting the idea of platform as a product and platform engineering. And that can happen even at the startup, right? So if we go to a startup with maybe 20, 30 people or 40, you might not have capacity to have a dedicated platform team, and you might have developers kind of trying to curate the minimum platform that is helpful to the other teams in the startup. And that's fine. But once you go beyond that, if you have start going beyond 50, 60, 70 people, I would really recommend having a platform team, even if it's a small platform team. Um, like I mentioned in the talk, platform teams are often overloaded, even when they're a dedicated team. Right? There's so many different aspects of the work they do that um, it creates a lot of cognitive load. And so, if you are saying a developer has to do their kind of product development, I suppose, work plus some platform work, that's really complicated and just causes a lot of obvious context switching, causes a lot of um, possibly poor outcomes because people are so overloaded. They need to take shortcuts and do the best they can with the little available capacity. So that's kind of the general picture, I would say. If you have the organization, the engineering organization, once it starts going beyond 50 people, try to set up a dedicated, a small platform team, even if it's just 3 or 4 people. But at least you have a team that is focusing their capacity on that thing, because that becomes then their business, between quotes, for that small team, is to help the other engineering teams, right? And you don't have developers kind of spread thin again over too many aspects. The results are not going to be very effective typically.
Right, right. So really, it's focusing on what can the team effectively accomplish without a platform team, and then weighing that against what a platform team could effectively accomplish, and that's going to give you your size right there, effectively.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Super. So that brings us to time. You talked did go a little bit long. That's okay, but we do want to keep it on the rails. Thank you to everybody that asked the questions. We will actually collect all of these questions and we'll send them off maybe afterwards to Manuel, and maybe we can get some answers after
Sure.
the conference is over. This is also a really really good topic to discuss in open spaces. So if you have ideas for open spaces, maybe you want to talk about platform teams and topologies and so forth, feel free to propose those. Thank you so much for coming on to the conference today and sharing a little bit of your time and your energy with us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.